Hi, nurse. Thank you for the information on Lucy Gray. I wanted to follow up after seeing her. Earlier, you mentioned that this might just be grief and that she's been here recently. And I understand where you're coming from. She has been in the emergency department a few times over the past few months. But after talking with her and reviewing her chart, I don't believe that this is something that we can brush off. Yes, Lucy is grieving the loss of her partner, and yes, she's lonely, but she's also experiencing real symptoms that are affecting her physically and emotionally. She described dizziness, weakness, and a pounding heart that led to her nearly falling today. This is her third 911 call in just 3 months, and that tells me that she doesn't feel safe or supported at home. So I took a closer look at what's going on with Lucy using the clinical judgment model from our assessment process. My initial assessment of Lucy is that Lucy's a 74-year-old woman who came into the emergency room today after getting dizzy and almost falling at home. When EMS arrived, she was alert and sitting on her couch, but she did scrape her arm. Her vital signs showed a blood pressure of 160 over 88, her heart rate was 102, and her oxygen level was in the 90s, while on 2 liters of oxygen through a nasal cannula. She mentioned feeling better by the time help arrived, but this is her third 911 call since her partner Julia has passed away 3 months ago. Lucy has a lot of strength. She's alert, oriented, and able to express herself clearly. Even after the fall, she was able to call 911, which shows that she still has good awareness and problem solving skills. She also has some support in her niece Nora and a neighbor named Adele who check in from time to time. From everything that she said, it sounds like she really wants to understand what's going on and stay safe, which is great. However, I do have some concerns. She's clearly a risk for falling. She's had multiple episodes in just a few months, and she's experiencing dizziness, weak knees, and even some anxiety symptoms like a racing heart. Emotionally, she's grieving and feeling very lonely. Living alone without consistent support only adds to the risk. She's also mentioned not taking her medication today, which makes me wonder if there might be some forgetfulness or even some signs of depression going on. I think her symptoms are probably connected to both physical and emotional factors. Before we make any decisions, I'd like to get a little more information. I want to know if Lucy's ever been screened for anxiety or depression and what the setup of her home is. Maybe there could be things that are causing her to trip, like rugs or stairs. Has she had a fall risk or home safety assessment done? And I'd also like to know more about how often Nora and Adele check in on her and if they're able to offer more consistent support. I think getting this information will really help us figure out the best way to support Lucy. My priority concerns. So, when it comes to Lucy, there are a few key concerns, but I think that the most urgent and high risk issue is her risk of falling. She's had multiple near falls and called 911 3 times in just the past few months. That pattern shows that this is happening often and seems to be escalating. Falls can lead to serious injury, especially for someone her age. So, preventing another one is my top priority. Another concern that I have is probably her emotional well being. Since her partner Julia passed away, she's been feeling isolated and overwhelmed. She talks about being anxious and having a pounding heart and just not feeling like herself. These are symptoms that could be related to grief or even anxiety, and they might make her physical symptoms worse. Because when someone's emotionally distressed, it can impact their sleep, it'll impact their balance, their eating habits, and it's going to increase the risk of her falls. Her living situation is something that we need to think about. She lives alone, and even though she does have a niece and a neighbor who check in from time to time, there's no one there with her regularly. So if she were to fall again, she might not be able to reach the phone or get help right away. Right? And that kind of isolation increases the danger in an emergency and makes recovery harder. By focusing on these priorities, we can start to put together a plan that supports Lucy physically, emotionally, and socially. Now that I've identified Lucy's main concerns, I think it's time that we talk about how we can help her immediately and also in the long term. I think we have to address her fall risk first. I would recommend a physical therapy and occupational therapy consult while she's here in the emergency department. PT can help her assess her balance and strength, especially since she mentioned weak knees, and OT can look into assistive devices or modifications she might need to make her home safer. I'd also suggest a full fall risk assessment and possibly a home safety evaluation before she's discharged. To help with her emotional health, I think Lucy would really benefit from grief counseling. She's clearly still processing the loss of her partner Julia, and it sounds like she hasn't had consistent support. A, refer- a referral to behavioral health or a licensed counselor could help her cope with anxiety and emotional distress. I'd also suggest a social work counselor to connect her with community resources, maybe a local senior center or grief support group, or even like Meals on Wheels. That could provide some social contact and also get her some healthy meals. Because she lives alone, I'd also recommend exploring whether she qualifies for home health services, having someone check in on her regularly, whether it's like a nurse's aide or a case manager. It could really make a big difference for her safety and security. If she's open to it, we might also discuss assisted living options where she could have more regular support and interaction. I think our ultimate goal is to make sure that Lucy knows that she's not alone and that there are options for her to feel safer and more supported. Based on everything I've seen and heard from Lucy, here's what I would like to do next. I want to make sure that Lucy is safe during her stay in the emergency department by putting fall precautions in place right now. Things like keeping the call bell within reach and making sure the bed is in the lowest position and helping her with any mobility needs while she's here. I'd also like to contact and her provider and recommend orders for both physical therapy and occupational therapy consults. This would help us get better understanding of her mobility limitations and if there are any assistive devices or exercises that could improve her stability. Let's also request a social work consult to evaluate what services might be available to support her at home. Um, and I'd also like to talk to the provider about referring Lucy to mental health professional for her grief and emotional distress. Lastly, I think I would like to sit down with Lucy and explain that she's not alone and that we have a team ready to support her. I'd like to make sure that she knows that calling 911 doesn't make her a burden. She did the right thing, but we want to help her find better, safer ways to manage her health and emotional well being at home. I think that taking these steps will help address her most urgent needs and start building a care plan that supports her holistically, not just physically, but emotionally and socially too.